Well, good morning, everybody. Am I on? Ferris Bueller, am I on here? You guys got me loud and clear up there? We good to go? Check, check, check. All right, we are live, as they say. So, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. Welcome once again, to all of you who will be viewing this via the webcast. And I have to say before I start, what I have in this cup up here, Bill's water. I tried to sneak coffee up here a little bit ago when I first came to church, and Margie caught me. And now, see, I'm on the board of directors here, and I should have thought twice about white carpet and clumsy me. So I'm going to stay away from the coffee, but this in my cup, Bill, is water, okay? Margie did her job. She caught me. I didn't get the memo. I didn't get that memo. But it's good to see everybody. And if you would please, while I begin my sermon today, would you make your way over as I make a little bit of an announcement and some other things here. Find your way to Ezekiel chapter 9, if you would please. Ezekiel chapter 9. And as Bill had so rightfully said in his sermonette presentation there, man, the Feast of Tabernacles is coming up quick. I'm not ready. I can admit to you I'm not ready. I think if my statistics are correct, I have 11 messages to give at the Feast of Tabernacles this year. So some prayers from God's people might not be a bad thing to ask for. We'll get through it, brethren. We'll get through it. God always provides sources of inspiration, does He not? But it's good to be here. But with the Feast of Tabernacles being mentioned, I would like to ask, if you could, anybody who is going to be here in Medina for the Feast of Tabernacles 2025, and you have in the past have had some sort of leadership or some sort of service position like information tables, song leading, piano playing, and things like that. If you would please, directly after services, let's just have a little bit of a get together here and kind of put our minds together just to make sure that we haven't had anything just slip through the cracks. I'll tell you what, the list of things to get ready for the feast is this long. My brain is only about that big. So I operate on those desktop memories like those old 480s in the 80s, and now you've got all these megabytes and all these bytes and stuff like that, but I'm still living in old school. Well, brethren, I want to talk about something, actually several things. Some things that are going on in our country, some current events that you may be made aware of here. I'll tell you what, man, I've never, since I can remember, as the more modern saying goes, been stuck in my feels, if you will, over the last 10 days over some of the things that have gone on in our country. And I don't know about you, brethren, but we have seen over the years a declining of some moralistic values, some godly values, of which our country was founded on. And every now and then, when I give a sermon on whether or not our country is Christian, I kind of say that tongue-in-cheek, because we were founded on Judeo-Christian principles. Has our execution been lacking? Absolutely. We have lacked in that. And I find an interesting parallel from ancient Israel to our times today. It seems like we keep repeating the same old pattern in our history, don't we? We have times of affluence when we're close to God. We have some apathy and compromise that comes in, and we have times of decline. Well, certainly, if you've been not hiding underneath a rock, you'll be well aware of the fact of the Charlie Kirk incident that occurred. And I got to admit to you that after all these years of being in God's church, I don't think that I've shed as many tears for somebody that I shed for someone I didn't even know of that incident that occurred. And I can remember years ago, Wayne Hendricks, remember Wayne Hendricks giving me a little bit of advice through the way of perspective. He said that a good speaker, a good public speaker, is marked by their ability to control their emotions. And I think that's true. And I hope that I do that today as I progress through this sermon. The sermon title, if you would like to know that or jot that down, the title of today's sermon is this the Turning Point, USA? things were going on in our country, not unlike that what was going on in the times of Ezekiel here in chapter 9 and verse 1. We'll break into the context. It says this. Then he called out in my hearing with a loud voice, saying, let those who have charge over the city draw near, each with a deadly weapon in his hand. And suddenly 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with his battle axe in his hand. One man among them was clothed with linen and had a writer's inkhorn at his side. They went and stood beside the bronze altar. Now, I have to admit that here recently I went and paid about $600 for a pair of glasses because I couldn't see. And after $600, I still can't see. So if I skip around a little bit, you're just going to have to forgive me, brethren, because I was always taught that your glasses should fix your vision. You shouldn't have to grow into the glasses, but I find myself trying to grow into these things. The older I get, the more lenses I tend to get in these things. It can be a little bit confusing to me. So, but here we go, starting into this context. They went and stood beside the bronze altar. Now the glory of God of Israel had gone up from the cherub, where it had been, to the threshold of the temple, and he called to the man clothed with linen, who had the writer's inkhorn at his side. And maybe this next verse that I read might resonate with you, given the circumstances of the last, did I say a week? About 10 days? Was it the Wednesday before last? That we witnessed on TV, live TV, or YouTube, the assassination of a human being who was a husband and a father, a company owner, and might I add, a civil rights leader in his time. He was a civil rights leader in a lot of ways, but I'll get to that here in just a minute. And the Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done within it. Now here we have a nation whose center focus was God in the sanctuary, who held on to godly morals and values, and as long as they did that, guess what, brethren? Israel had it pretty good, didn't they? But there are two words that creep into society that cause things to be kind of skewed. Follow through isn't what it's supposed to be. And therefore the results and the benefits of following God aren't what they're supposed to be, because the two words of apathy and compromise make us stumble, don't they? Not only individually, but also as a nation. America, a Christian nation. I've already addressed that just a little bit, and I know people have some kickback when it comes to that. I understand that in our lack of execution, we can question that sometimes, but we always have to go back to our foundation to prove that point. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Mayflower Compact, and those kind of things, brethren, in our execution sometimes just doesn't seem to be where it should be. Do you realize that 9 out of the 13 colonies, the original colonies, these great United States of America, do you realize to be a member of those colonies, you had to be a Bible believer and in regular church attendance? I don't know if you know that or not. And up until roughly about the 1950s, if you consider this, go back in history and look how things have changed, how our culture has changed, and how the introduction of counterculture against Christianity began to encroach itself upon our nation. You can trace this back roughly, let me think about this for a second, roughly about the 1950s. At apex during the 1960s and 70s, and we've been going on this course for a long time because people have become apathetic and have compromised the expectations of our Creator. And now we see some things going on in our land, brethren, that sometimes cause us to... You ever find yourself doing that? That's a good exercise to kind of relieve stress. I don't know if you know that or not. But to cry for what's going on in our land. See, America has a very rough history, if you will, with civil rights leader in our land. What do we do as civil rights leaders in our country? We shut them up. We kill them. Apathy and compromise is the enemy of a godly culture. So what happens is, You got all these standards, you got the foundations, apathy and compromise starts to come in. You get some diametrically opposing viewpoints, the worldly or what do you call that, carnal-minded viewpoints come up and encroach themselves and press against Christianity, and you find yourselves in a culture war. A culture war. Different ideologies, different beliefs. Sometimes they converge together in public like we've just recently seen, and some things happen. But really, if you think about it, you can agree to disagree with almost anybody as long as you have civil discourse in the land. Do you believe that? You may not believe everything I say about the Sabbath day. I may not believe everything that you think about the Sabbath day, but we can discuss it as mature individuals in a healthy manner, and guess what? We can get along. We can get along. But sometimes, brethren, in this discourse, in this exchange of ideas, as the counterculture converges with the godly culture, somehow, some way, somewhere, someone ultimately loses the debate. And I would submit to you, for your consideration, amongst many reasons why Charlie Kirk was taken out like he was, is because the counterculture knows that they've lost the debate. And when you lose the debate, see, I've always said this. I've said this for years. If Christianity were simply a matter of debate, everybody would be Christian. But see, people don't like to hear the truth sometimes, brother. But countercultures, brethren, when that discourse, that communication breaks down and people become desperate, what happens? They act out desperately, don't they? And as a matter of disagreement, civil disagreement turns into violence because one person understands that, hey, I've lost this. There's no other way for me to get back under control than to change this in a different manner. I'll take it by force. Does that ever work? Whether you're talking about this extreme example that I'm talking about with Charlie Kirk, or you're talking about this thing, and we don't think it exists, but it does. What about censorship? Have you heard recently anything regarding this Operation Arctic Frost? Have you heard about that? In which I believe it was the FBI, governmental institution, by the way, was militarized and trying to shut down anybody who had a Christian conservative viewpoint. And they were hunted down, they were searched after, and they were trying to ruin them financially. That happened underneath the previous administration, not this one. But we have some really, really high emotionally times here, don't we, brethren, in this country? I would submit to you that we live in more volatile times than were around in the 1960s. And people have asked me the question, and I've done my best to answer the question the best that I can. And people always ask this: are we at civil war? Have you thought about that? Well, civil war happens when both sides take up arms. But here's what I can say. When you look at history, when you examine what's happened in the past, not just in America, but worldwide, civil war has always started with bloodshed. Let me give you some facts here, some historical facts of some things that have happened. How did the Revolutionary War start? You remember that? Going back to our history books. I'm digging back in my index cards right here in my brain trying to get the facts right here. But what started the Revolutionary War? A convergence of different ideas. Taxation without representation. I'm the king. I'm authoritarian. You'll do as I say. And guess what happened? Ever heard of the Boston Massacre? The Boston Massacre was one of the catalysts of one of the biggest wars and one of the most important wars fought on this continent. And then the Boston Massacre led to what? Do you remember this? The shot that was heard around the world, Lexington and Concord, and thus began the armed revolution. Now, there's still debate. I'm going to digress a little bit. There was a little bit of debate of who actually fired that first shot. Have you ever heard that? I don't believe the British did it because they were too, how do I put that, regimented and strict. They were very well trained, When you come up against a militia and you're looking at this juggernaut in their nice uniforms and those shiny bayonets, and you're starting to get the hand near the trigger, and, accidental discharges happen. But no one really knows who started that, but it started with the Boston Massacre there. Lexington and Concord, the shot heard around the world. World War I. How did World War I occur? Do you remember that? What did it start with? Archduke Ferdinand, I believe it was Serbia? Boy, that whole area, brother, is a powder keg, like Poland. I said it 3 years ago. Powder keg. Archduke Ferdinand assassinated, which led to World War. We have a history, we have a pattern. One of America's, arguably, I understand that there are some people that may not want to credit John F. Kennedy for this, but John F. Kennedy is still considered to this day a civil rights leader in our country. I don't know what happened up and before he was elected, and I don't know what happened up and before he had a meeting with Martin Luther King Jr., but somehow this civil rights movement happened. Namely, those two civil rights leaders, what happened to JFK? Dealey Plaza. November 22nd, 1963, considered a wonderful civil rights leader who was promoting black American rights of equality, was gunned down. Now we're starting to learn some more information about that, aren't we? It seems that people who believed in conspiracy theories or people who were conspiracy fanatics ain't so crazy, are they? It's amazing. It's amazing. And that movement has lasted up until this time, but I'm sure you would agree, and speaking to Martin Luther King Jr. too, absolutely one of my favorite pastors of all time. I'm not saying that, that's the reality of it, who chose peace over violence. If it weren't for Martin Luther King Jr. in this country, there would have been bloodshed everywhere. Thanks be to God for him, for his example of civil disobedience and peaceful discussion. We might be singing a different tune right now had it gone the other way. I'll tell you, but he was gunned down. But with this civil rights movement, have you ever noticed that there's been a little bit of apathy and compromise that have even entered to that? That civil rights movement that started back then was never meant to be what it's become today. Rights to marry the same sex, LGBTQ. I've lost track. I've literally lost track of how many genders people think that there are. Now, to me, that's lunacy. That's crazy. As people who believe in the Bible, we understand that. How many genders are there? Let me test you. How many genders, brethren? Two. But people will tell you, if that's what you believe, you're nuts. You're crazy. You're crazy. And the furry movement, the furry movement? I didn't know this. I didn't know this till recent events happened. Did you know that the furry movement is considered a, how do you put this? A subculture of transgender? I didn't know that. I've never seen people in our country who are so confused, I kind of feel sorry for them over their gender. I would feel sorry for somebody if they really didn't understand that they were a biological male, that they're a boy. Or a girl, you're a biological female, but I feel like I'm male. Brethren, I feel sorry for people like that. I do. It must be miserable to not be comfortable in your own skin. It must be miserable. So we have all these things interfering with what's meant to be good, like the civil rights movement, the things that have come onto it. And brethren, as a result of all this, we have a cultural war going on in our country. And as a result of the cultural war, with the bloodshed that is going on, I got some statistics for that too. We find ourselves in a new America. We do. Violence is starting to become so commonplace, that when they announce things like the Charlie Kirk assassination, it's like, and in today's news, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Now on to Rebecca for the weather. Thank you, Chuck. Looks like things are looking up. And then we go on and we hear all these announcements that doesn't really impact us much, but with the invention of this media outlets that we have, when you see it, if it's not live or you see it, and what they used to say, is it live or is it Memorex? Boy, man, it gets me right here. It gets me right here. And if it doesn't make you sigh and cry regarding the abominations of what it led up to in our country, you better splash some cold water on your face, church. Because the mark of a Christian, one of the marks I should say, the definition of a Christian, I understand, is those who have the Holy Spirit. I understand that. But beyond that, what makes us good people? Generally speaking, not even Christians, you know what makes a good person? Those who have the ability, the mental capacity, in a humanistic way to empathize. And when you have lost your ability to empathize, even if you don't agree with them, you know, there are people in the church I don't agree with. There are people in the church that don't agree with me. That's fine. We can have a discussion. That's fine. I like that, actually. Not necessarily a bad thing. But my goodness, brethren, people today are out of control. Out of control. These things can be handled with just a simple conversation. In fact, some statistics I want to give you. Some things that we've seen in our culture since 2017. I don't know if you know this or not. 2017. This just shows the change that we've had over the years as far as morality is concerned, and that how violence has been accepted in our land. I don't know if you know this or not, but in a recent poll that was done, 26% of those who leaned left wing, 26%, get that. That's almost a third of people on that, how do I put this, on that fanatical side believe that violence is okay to get your point across. 7% of those on the far right believe that violence is okay. You put those two together, brethren, you've got at least 1/3 or more of our country who believes that violence is the way to go. It doesn't ever work that way. I can remember, I might have this reversed, but if you go back through history, you remember two guys in history. I'm not going to sit here and say that I agree with their philosophy, but two very prominent people in history, Socrates and Plato. Do you remember those two people? Do you remember why, I believe it was, Plato came around? Because Socrates was told to shut his mouth. We don't want to hear what you're saying anymore. And as a result, he didn't. And what did they do? They killed him. They killed him. And then Plato stood up and said, he was a student of Socrates, and said, nope, you just made it worse, now it's my turn. And you just make it worse. It runs its gamut from censorship to the extremism that we've seen today in our land. Over there in Utah, our world has changed, given those statistics. And I do understand, brethren, that there's going to be some sort of a memorial service? Not a funeral, but a memorial service for Charlie Kirk tomorrow. If you would please, go to your prayer closets and pray that that's peaceful. Pray that that's peaceful. Because we're gravitating toward a way that's unacceptable. Since June 25th, 2025, Democratic State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband were gunned down. Let me ask you this. Did you see any conservative Christians celebrating? I didn't either. And I'm not trying to do this they versus them or anything like that, but I'm just saying we've got to control our emotions in times like this. People lack control. Gunned down, July 13th, 2025. First assassination attempt by against Donald J. Trump, and which brought about cries of, boy, if it would have just been an inch more. I have family members that believe that. You know how hard it is to get along with family members when they think that way? It is a tragedy, even if another U.S. president were to be assassinated. If you didn't agree with them, we shouldn't gloat in it. That's a whole different story. August 22nd, 2025, Ukrainian immigrant murdered by a psychopath. Had her throat slit 14 times by somebody who had been incarcerated and released 14 times. That was shocking enough. But then you watch the video. I mean, it was everywhere. And what did you see people doing? Oop, don't want to see that. How long did it take for people to help? The irony in this is, brethren, the irony of this is, she was an immigrant from Ukraine. If I could pronounce her name, I'll try it. I don't want to be disrespectful here. How do you pronounce this? Well, I was smart enough not to put it in my notes because I couldn't pronounce it. So, the irony of all this is she fled Ukraine because of the violence. Statistically, she was safer to remain in Ukraine than she was in a subway in Minnesota because of liberal-minded... boy, I could get myself in trouble today. I won't say it. I'll filter. Released this man 14 times. And now this girl, little girl, she was in her low 20s. I call her a little girl because I'm 55 and they're kids to me at this point. And she fled because of the physical violence. What was her evil? She came over here and got a full-time job at a pizza shop, worked long hours, and her off time, she rescued homeless animals. In America. In America. August 27th, 2025, in Minnesota. You ever notice how Minnesota tends to be a hub in all this? Minnesota is a hot spot here. Trans activist Robin Westman, 23, murdered 2 children and wounded 21 others while riding on the it's not a clip. Clip goes on the magazine, AR-15. Trans person writes, "Where's your God now?" Brethren, there is evil in this land. And now Charlie Kirk. I got to tell you, it's one of these things I will never forget where I was at the time my son texted me. I thought it was a prank. "Hey, Dad, have you heard about Charlie Kirk?" "No, he's dead." "What? He's dead?" "No, come on." "Yeah." So I got on my phone. I'll be darned. There it is. Activist Charlie Kirk, Charlie Kirk was killed by somebody who is now, through the investigation, finding out that he might have connections to Antifa, that means anti-fascism, and was also a sympathizer and had a transgender lover. And the results of those accusations have brought about some very, very troubling perspectives from people in the media. Did you watch Montel Williams, what he said about it? This was a guy who just had his first love. And because Charlie Kirk was so hateful, I'm ad-libbing here, that he had to feel that he had to stand up for his first love. In fact, another reporter likened it unto the Montagues and Capulets. Do you remember that story? Who are the Montagues and Capulets, brethren? Romeo and Juliet. They're likening it unto a love story that he was forced to do this because people were attacking his love. Boy, I tell you what, brethren. What was Charlie Kirk guilty of? Preaching the gospel? There are some things about Charlie Kirk, brethren, people don't realize. He was closer to one of us than what you realize, if you've listened to him long enough. I probably won't get to it, so I'll just go ahead and spill the beans now. Do you know that on many occasions, and I confirm this because I watched him, Charlie Kirk spoke favorably of the seventh-day Sabbath? Do we realize that? In another video I watched, a young man, I think he was 22, had just recently gotten married, approached Charlie Kirk at one of his events and said, "Hey, Charlie, I'm not here to debate you. I'm here for some advice. I just got married. How can I have a successful marriage?" You know what he said? One of the first things he said, honor God's Sabbaths. Sabbaths. And to this day, I still have people that get angry with me because I said he was more like us than he wasn't like us because he believed in going to heaven. Man, there are people out there, brethren, who don't get everything right. I mean, if we were to impeach everybody as being a non-Christian because I had a little bit of a different belief because maybe God hadn't opened his eyes to that yet, I don't know if any of us would be left. I know people in God's church that believe demons mated with women. I'm not going to call them unchristian. I know people that believe that if you don't say Yahshua or Yeshua or things like that, even though they themselves don't know how to pronounce it, the Jews don't even know how to. That if you don't invoke God's name in the Hebrew tongue, He won't hear your prayers. Boy, it's so frustrating. I've had a lot of prayers answered speaking English. I've had a lot of prayers answered. So, why are we here? Why are we in this? One thing that I appreciated when you saw the governor of Arizona, Governor Cox, did you watch that? Man, he made a very poignant statement. He looked out there, and I'm not going to break down everything he said or critique everything that he said, but he said, America, we are at an impasse. We have an opportunity to get off the exit ramp and go back to civil discourse, or we can continue on the path we're going and have the same results. Now, I'm paraphrasing that too. I didn't write it all out. And because of that, brethren, we ask ourselves a question because of that opportunity that's before us. Is this our turning point, USA? Or will this be another example of us asking the question we've asked for many years now? America, what's next? We are at an impasse. We are at a crossroads, brethren. In fact, Jesus warned us, if you'd please turn over to Matthew chapter 10, that these things would happen. And because really, what was at attack? Again, freedom of speech. Charlie Kirkton believed in making disciples. He believed in the Sabbaths. Now, whether or not he had perfect clarity, as much clarity as you can have with those things, he was murdered for his ideas that you could still have a civil discussion about God in this country. And he went to where? The youth of this country, because he understood that they would be the future of this country, and that's why he lost his life. But there's something deeper than that. There's something deeper than that. And Jesus over here in Matthew chapter 10, verse 27 says this. When Jesus departed, wait a minute, glasses, can't see, 27. Whatever I tell you in the dark, speak in the light, and what you hear in the ear, preach on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill your body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear Him who is able to destroy both soul and body in them. Turning Point USA, change my mind. Civil discourse, dialogue. I don't know if you realize this or not, but he turned the hearts of many on different campuses across the country. Many of those campuses that used to be of that real far left-wing minded is now no longer like that. No longer like that. But I don't know if you remember who started that. You remember who started Change My Mind? Yeah, Steven Crowder started that. Do you know why Steven Crowder quit doing that? After 12 felonious assaults and death threats and physical assaults and other things, he had to take it back to the studio because people were losing the debate. And they acted in desperation. They acted in desperation. But when it comes to whether or not people are Christian or not, like I began to address here just a little bit ago, Could we do one thing? When we go about defining who is Christian and who isn't, could we leave that up to what the Apostle Paul said? The Apostle Paul made a statement. Let Christ name his who are his. It's none of my business who he calls Christian. As I said many times, if I get there, if I make it into the kingdom in the first resurrection, and I look over and I see, whether it be Mother Teresa or Charlie Kirk or someone else that didn't have the doctrines just right, am I going to say, hey, Lord, come on. Her? Really? What's going on, man? I will call whom I call. I'm not going to argue with them. If you want to, you go right ahead. But I'm going to be in the corner over there watching, okay? But we have all these people who've gone out there to preach the gospel and have risked their lives for this, and Jesus Christ continues this. He says, are not two sparrows sold for a copper coin, and not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Father's will, but the very hairs on your head are numbered. Do not fear, therefore. You are much more valuable than the sparrow. Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, him I will deny before my Father who is in heaven. Do not think the real reason why Charlie Kirk was killed. Those other items notwithstanding. But you know, when you mention the word of Christ in public, you will get a response. In fact, I had to go to the BMV, Bureau of Motor Vehicles yesterday, put new tags on my truck. And the lady that was helping me, I noticed she had a New Testament Bible. And I was talking to her, I said, hey, I like your book. It's a good book to read. I didn't take her to task that she didn't have the Old Testament. I just said, good book. And she says, I know you might think so, but my coworkers try to make me put it away. There's a real dichotomy of ideas in this country, isn't there? When there was once freedom, even though it wasn't always the right doctrine, there was always freedom to espouse one's belief and religious viewpoints. In fact, it was expected, even in a public discourse. But when you mention the name of Christ, you will get a response. You have two choices. Three, really. Oh, I'm a believer. Nah, I don't care. Number three, I don't believe that hogwash. Put it away. I remember at the sheriff's office, when I was losing my job for the sheriff's office, they tried to make me I kept my Bible on post because it kept me in line. It kept me in line. And the major came to me and said, the sheriff said, put your Bible away. And I said, tell the sheriff to come get it. It's not going anywhere. The people in jail got Gideon's Bibles. Why can't I have mine? You have to stand in the gap for Christ during the times that we're in. This is a culture war. We are underneath civil strife, but be careful. Be wise as serpents. And what, brethren? Hear it. Harmless as doves. If we have a discourse, if we have a discussion, it should be peaceful. That's how God's people are. For I've come to set a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, and a mother-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. And he who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my name's sake will find it. I have no fault to find in Charlie Kirk losing his life for preaching Jesus Christ, for standing up for the Sabbaths, as he understood it, and going to the heart of the future leaders of the country, college students. He preached with the heart of Elijah. He preached with the heart of Christ. He preached with the heart of a prophet, if you will. And I got to wonder, and I don't speak dogmatically about this, I won't, because I don't know. Could we have just watched the killing of another prophet? At least a wise man. What I can say dogmatically is he had the heart of a prophet, because I heard him say this myself. I don't care what people think about me. as long as I'm preaching and doing what I should be doing. That is the heart of a prophet. And what was ancient Israel known for, brethren? Hey, God says you shouldn't do that. Whack. Hey, God says, you know what? That ain't right what you're doing. That's what we do to prophets or people that speak with the heart of a prophet. In fact, America has engaged herself in what is known in psychology as groupthink. Have you ever heard that? T-H-I-N-K. Groupthink. You know what that is? Us versus them. I like, however, the way that Christian psychologists put it. Group evil. You've seen it on the playgrounds. I've mentioned it here before. Oh, there's a fight. Look at that, there's a fight. Look at the fight. Go, go, go. Get him, get him, get him. Oh, did you see his face? Until they're in the fight, then it ain't so funny anymore, is it? That's group evil. When you get a class of society who encroaches upon what's considered the normalcy in any land or any personal life, you get this convergence of ideas, and you get this group think, even though it may be a minority. Try going to the workplace today and putting your Bible on your desk, and surely you'll find out. You'll find out real quick who's around you. Because since COVID, that us versus them mentality has really taken root. People thought that during COVID that they were the enforcers of your health and your wearing of the mask. And they had no qualms with telling you what you should do. And now because that authoritarian approach has been embraced, we got a bunch of people now who aren't afraid to tell you how you ought to live your life. And most of the time it's not the way that God tells us to live it. And what really, really, really probably has all of our lips chapped right now. This is me. This is where I'm at with this. It was the reaction that people had to what we saw a week ago from this last Wednesday. Either you sighed and you cried. I did. Didn't even know the man. But when I saw a video of when he was first engaged to his wife, Erica. I don't know if you watched this video, and he took her into the studio. Charlie Kirk walks in, and man, her face lights up. She loved that guy. She was in love with that man. And then to see the change in her expression now, and listen, and have to listen to her explain what it's like to explain to a 3-year-old. Where's Dad at? I got to tell you, if that doesn't pull your heartstrings, I don't know what will. Do you realize that his family was in the audience? If you're not sighing and crying, brethren, check your pulse. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it is expected from people who still have the ability to empathize with people in society we don't get along with. And if you can't do that, that is the true definition of what evil is. Listen to this. Groupthink or group evil. North Carolina University. Kill all Charlie Kirks. That was on their school sign. So I bought a shirt that says, I am Charlie Kirk. The House, when the Speaker asked for prayers for Charlie Kirk and his family, it was responded with cries from the other side saying, no! Why wouldn't you offer prayers for another human being? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? MSNBC blamed the assassination on Trump supporters who got excited and wildly let their guns off in the crowd. It's like you're in a saloon. I've never seen that. I've never seen that. The list goes on and on. Stephen King. It's his fault. Jimmy Kimmel. Now, hopefully you've seen this stuff and I'm not bringing up things you're not aware of. But boy, when I gave this sermon last week, you probably wouldn't want to hear it. I was too much in my feels. I've calmed down since then. Nate Burleson, you ever seen him? Former receiver of the Detroit Lions. Maybe he should have watched his rhetoric. At the same time, he's got his nice fitting suits on, big old diamond earrings, and he always when the camera goes to him, he always goes, like he's a 12-year-old taking a selfie. Effeminate. Effeminate. And this is what's so important and why I mentioned God starting in Ezekiel chapter 9 with my sanctuary. I think we all would agree that a healthy society as it pertains to God and His values are only as good as long as we maintain those godly standards and values. Otherwise, you get something completely different. It takes every crevice of society to maintain that godliness. In fact, we don't have a democracy. We have a representative republic, and the forefathers even admitted, this is going to be dependent, fellows, on the morality of our society. If the morality of our society goes in declination, we will fail to exist as a country. Prophetic. Almost prophetic. Pastor Dr. Howard John Wesley, and I say pastor. Did you see the message he gave to his congregation? A pastor. I'd call him a false prophet, but called Charlie Kirk a lifelong racist who sowed division in the land. Now, I've examined Charlie Kirk's sermons. I've watched them, or his presentations. And there is a parallel, like I'm saying here, that Christ said that, that there would be responses to the things that his name would be mentioned. And quite frankly, I didn't find any fault in it. I didn't find fault with what he said. I watched transgender people. I watched them approach the lectern. Hey, Charlie, I grew up in an abusive home, and now I'm confused. I was born a biological male, but now I want to be female. And not like the other street pastors who say, repent or you're going to hell. Sinner. I wonder what they are. Aren't we all sinners? I watched this man handle these individuals who were so confused and psychologically disturbed with such empathy. It was brilliant. 31 years old, he had the wisdom of an elder. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe the way he handled this. But is this anything new? Political violence is anything new? I just read you a scripture that Jesus had mentioned here about getting responses from Christ and Him telling us not to be worried about that. But make your way over with me to Mark chapter 3. Political violence is nothing new in our country. And might I add this, what we're seeing in our country today is really a parallel that went on during the days of Christ. Do you know that there were political groups during the days of Christ, namely 4 of them, that did such practices? I can't remember Charlie Kirk's assassin's name right now. I don't really care. I don't want to give him any press. But there were groups within the New Testament church that practiced what he did. Okay? Over here in Mark chapter 1. Yeah. And I'll just break into the context. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, Mark chapter 1, verse 1. The Son of God, as it is written in the prophets, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make His path straight. And if you go back to the book of Malachi chapter 4, what was the message? I will send you Elijah. You remember that? Before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Has that happened yet? What's the context of Malachi? Isn't that future? Now, we have admission by Christ Himself who fulfilled the role of Malachi, his message, the prophet, the ministry of Elijah. It was John the Baptist. But there are some people, and I'm not going to tell you what I think about this, I'm just presenting this to you as what people think, that prophecy being dual in nature, that John the Baptist fulfilled that role, but yet there would be someone in the future who would have a more comprehensive message before the return of Christ. And the message was returning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers. And that's why Charlie Kirk went to the universities. He understood a godly family and the foundations of our country were reliant upon faith in God and the traditional definition of a core valued family. That's why he was gunned down. That's why he was gunned down. And here we have this. We'll just break down here. John does all of his baptizing, the things that he's doing. Hold on, I'm having a glasses moment, brethren. Forgive me. Anyways, I can't read it, so here's what I'm going to do. When John the Baptist preached the message that he did, and that message culminated, remember that? Do you remember why John the Baptist was killed? Do you remember when he went to Herod? Do you remember what he said to Herod? He said, maybe it's not lawful for you to be doing that with another woman. He was preaching against sexual immorality. And what did Herod do? Well, there was a group, brethren, back in the times of Christ called the Herodians. You ever heard about them? You remember who the Herodians were? Let me read it to you. It means to kill or to assassinate. A political party of Jews who supported Herod and the Roman rule, mentioned 3 times in the Scriptures, also mentioned in Mark chapter 12 and Matthew chapter 22 and verse 16. They were lax in morals and religious observance. The Pharisees and the Herodians detested one another until it came to uniting against conspiring against a man who preached moralities named Christ. What did the Herodians practice? Assassination. Political group. Ancient Jerusalem, the times of Christ. Over here in Acts chapter 1, if you would please. Mark chapter 1. Or Acts chapter 1. And for time's sake, we'll just go to verse 13. And when they had entered, they went up to the upper room where they were staying, Peter, James, John, and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas the son of James. Simon the Zealot is what I want to focus on right now. There was another political group called the Zealots. There are some theories out there, and again, I won't speak about this dogmatically, that Simon may have been a part of this political group before he became converted and therefore switched his mind from the destructive ways into embracing Christ and became zealous for Christ. But here's the Zealots. Here's what they did. A Jewish political group formed to resist Roman rule. The Zealots supported or resorted to violence and assassination. They were fanatics against authority. They get their name because of the zeal that they had. They practiced assassination. I can't say that Simon was a part of that, but that is one of the theories that are out there. He used to be a part of it. After his conversion, he changed and became zealous for Christ. I can't substantiate in the Scriptures. That's just what people say. Over here in Luke chapter 23, if you would please. Luke chapter 23. I'm not going to read all of this. Let's just read a few verses here. In verse 1, then the whole multitude of Luke chapter 23, in verse 1, the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate. Do you remember this discourse? Do you remember this night when Jesus was passed along between people by people? I've broken that down mathematically. It was more than just a couple times. If you actually go through and dissect it in chronological order of what happened. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this fellow perverting the nation. Well, what was he doing? Preaching the same message, reconciliation of the fathers to the children to the fathers, revealing the Father, and preaching, as Bill mentioned, the gospel of the kingdom of God. Right? Boy, if you preach the gospel in some places, boy, people think that you're the evil one. They really think that. Forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king. Then Pilate asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered and said to him, "It is all as you say." He didn't deny it. He didn't lie. He just says, "As you say, sir." So Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no fault in this man." But they were more fierce, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place." And Pilate thinks to himself, wait a minute. Ho, Galilean. Huh. Let's get him to Herod. There's more to this scripture than what we think there is. Jesus was being not only accused of being from a certain region, he was also being accused of being affiliated with a certain political group in Jerusalem. Here it is right here, the Galileans. The name became anonymous with lawless violence. This is really what they're saying about Christ. Joined the zealots who practiced what, brethren? Assassination. This was intentionally brought up at the time of Christ's trial to prejudice the court. They also believed and looked down at the southern Jews as rustic and unlearned, ignorant, just like those from the southern Bible Belt. You can't believe in the Bible, can you? That's rustic, that's ignorant. Practice assassination. Then the last one, Acts chapter 21. Acts chapter 21. And verse 37, even the Apostle Paul was accused of belonging to a radical political group that practiced violence. What I'm saying here, brethren, is what we're seeing in our country, not trying to marginalize it or diminish the impact of what's happened, but this is nothing new. Unfortunately. In 37, then, as Paul was about to be led to the barracks, he said to the commander, "May I speak to you?" He replied, "Can you speak Greek?" And by the way, just a short digression. Charlie Kirk also believed something else. And maybe that's why I have such an affection for him and his message. He believed it was wrong for the pastors to not speak about the things that are considered politics. Far be it for the pastors of this nation to leave up the topic of abortion to the politicians. He said that was the pastor's job. Far be it to leave any issuance or any conversation that speaks of any kind of immorality in our land, don't leave it to the politicians. The pastors should be doing that. And he said, if your pastors aren't doing that, leave. Because church is not a place to be entertained. It's not a place for a lot of music and a lot of lights and a lot of singing and all that stuff. It is a place for rejoicing. It is a place to be edified. But it is a place to learn about God, to receive correction, edification, encouragement for the things that are going on. If you want entertainment, go to a concert. That's what Charlie Kirk believed in. Are you not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred up a rebellion and led the 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness? And by the way, the book of Acts, I don't know if you ever broke this down, but what people consider politics, and I would call it appealing to our rights as citizens within a country that has its foundational roots in Christianity, roughly 2/3, get this, 2/3 of the book of Acts is dedicated to the Apostle Paul saying, wait a minute, I'm a Roman citizen. Why are you doing this? And he'd go up the chain and talk to different people. Charlie Kirk had a ministry, I don't know if you know this or not, whom he had contact with world leaders. And he spoke to world leaders about God. I'll never have that. Charlie Kirk will have an impact on the world more than I ever will. And I don't say that in I say that in good job. Good job, brother. Good job. But here the Apostle Paul is associated with a group called the Assassins. And really had nothing to do with the Assassins. He preached the same gospel message that John the Baptist did, Jesus Christ did, and consequently we do today. And he was accused of things he didn't do, just like Charlie Kirk case you didn't know this, it's football season, and Charlie Batch was a quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, so sometimes I get them mixed up. Charlie Kirk, not Charlie Batch. But Charlie Kirk was accused of, like this pastor said, of preaching hate and racism. He did nothing of the kind. In fact, I witnessed him preach the opposite. So if people can't silence you, if they can't shut your mouth, they'll disparage you, they'll create a straw man, and if that ain't enough, they'll kill you. Because the debate's been lost on that side. The assassins, who were they? This group was a secret society. There's no such thing as a deep state, is there? A secret society known in Rome. When Rome was in their last troubled years, they became a thorn in the side of the Roman Empire. With dagger and cloak, murdered their patrons and enemies and those who supported their enemies. Okay? They used cloak and dagger, the swiftness of their attack, and the frantic panic of their crowd to elude detection. Sound familiar? This is nothing new. This is just another stain on our culture. This is a disgrace what's happened in our country. It's an absolute disgrace what's happened. What I can't believe, again, I've seen this, throughout all these different kinds of incidents. Did you watch the videos where some college students were going, hey, it looks like a guy on the roof? Okay. What do we do now? Oh, hey, there's a guy on the roof. Isn't that the same thing they were doing when Donald J. Trump was almost assassinated? Hey, there's somebody on the roof over there. What should we do? Oh, I don't know. Don't you tell somebody? Where are the resilient people in this community that stand up and say something? Why was there no ambulance? Not that that would have done anything. But you got 3,000 people in a crowd and you don't think somebody might trip and sprain an ankle or something? No ambulance? Why were there only 6 police officers in the crowd? For 3,000 people? It was a logistical nightmare and lent itself to these type of things. Why were there no drones? A 12-year-old's got a drone. See, all this stuff lends itself to building up conspiracies. And it causes distrust in the country. We got to be wary about that. We got to be cautious about that. And I'll tell you, brethren, there's so much more that I could go through and I could talk about. But suffice it to say, brethren, when we look at all these things that are going on in our country, I'll tell you what, it gives me enough reason to pause and to sigh and cry for what's going on in the land today. What we witnessed was a tragic event that lost a wife without a husband, kids without a father, and one less American, one less Christian that puts his shoulder to the wheel and sighs and cries for the things that are going on in our land. As Governor Cox said in his press conference, America, we are at an impasse. We have an opportunity to get off at the exit ramp and turn around and return to civil discourse and discussion, or we can continue the path that we're going. And we can continue to ask the question, America, what's next? The only question that remains to be seen is this. Is this our turning point, USA?